will go ahead and contact your seller ahead of time to have them sign it, and we'll send it into the payoff company so that they go ahead and freeze that account so that no more payments are being made.
So like if they put in a pool, would that be the same thing if they put in a pool after they bought their house? I mean, would that be here, or would that just be covered in?
It would most likely be covered underneath the home improvement loan.
Okay.
And I don't think that home improvement loans are the lines of credit. I think it's just a one lump sum, and then they just pay it back every month. Okay. Okay, and then the tax agreement form. And of course, these next few ones are our title company forms. The tax agreement, of course, is signed by both seller and buyer. And this just lets them know that the proration of the property taxes were done off of the most current values that we have. Now, if for some reason the tax values are to go up tremendously, other than what we prorated off of course, it's up to the seller and buyer to work that out amongst both of them. Okay, the next form is the notice to purchaser, or the water district notice. This is also a seller and buyer form. When the property is in a MUD, we do have this completed and signed, and it's part of the recording fee that we charge the buyer. Okay, the next one is a survey. And these always kind of get a little bit sticky. You'll have some of your sellers say, oh, well, we have an existing survey, and you know, there haven't been any improvements or anything like that, so we want to see if we can use it. Save your buyer $430, if not a little bit more, depending on the size of the lot. We always like to tell agents that if you have a survey, make sure you can read it. Because once you scan it or you email it to us or fax it to us, if you can't really read all the information on here, 9 times out of 10, when we get it, we're not going to be able to read it either.
Is there a rule of thumb on how long a survey is good for? If you have a T-47, and I mean, are they good for 10 years, 20 years?
Well, some underwriters used to have like a 7-year rule. You used to have a 10-year and a 12-year rule. Well, a lot of your underwriters have kind of come away from that. They don't really have time stipulations, as long as your sellers can honestly sign a T-47 stating that there have been no improvements. From my standpoint, if I have a survey that's dated back in the 1970s or the 1980s, I would prefer to have a new survey done. Just because, you know, easements, things could be recorded since then, things removed, and there's no stipulation. It's just no rule of thumb that it's just if it's more than 12, years old or something, probably best to just go ahead and have a new survey. But we're not going to require one. But
our open order checklist says sometimes old, sometimes new. I can't read it. How about you?
Yeah.
oh, there you go.
I can live with that rule. That makes sense.
That's on your survey.
So if we are using an existing survey, some kind of tidbits to look for. One, of course, make sure there's a scale. Always make sure that it has, it has the property address. Oh, up here at the top. So you always want to make sure, of course, it has the full property address. And like this particular surveyor, Precision, they put legal description, property, all that up here at the top. Of course, make sure that you have a full legal description there. And then towards the bottom, this little bitty box here in the middle, that is your surveyor's certification box. it is a must that your surveyor has put their certification box along with their seal, and they also signed. And then their seal.
This was signed over the seal.
Mhm.
Okay, gotcha.
And then, of course, you know, the easements and the building line, as far as the drawing goes, everything is pretty clear. I mean, this would be a good survey that if the seller wanted to provide this to the title company and to the buyer's agent, along with the T-47 stating that no improvements have been done, this would be a good survey. We would definitely take this and run with it. Okay. The next form, this is a seller form, your disbursement authorization. If your seller wants us to wire funds, this is a form that we would have them sign at closing. Also, if your seller is perhaps selling their home with us and purchasing their home with another title company, if they want their funds wired to that other title company they're purchasing at, we would have to have the wiring instructions given to us from that title company. And if the seller is a husband and wife, and they do want their funds wired, we ask to have a voided check, and that account has to be a joint account. It cannot be in husband's name or wife's name. It has to be in both of their names. Okay. Okay, the next form is a seller form only. It's the affiliated business arrangement disclosure statement. And all this is basically just stating is letting your seller know that National TaxNet is affiliated with the Fidelity Chicago Title family, and they're the ones who provide tax certificates to us. Okay. Okay, the next form is debts, liens, and possession affidavit. This is a seller-only form as well. And on there it gives different questions that they have to either write none or do a blank in, basically just stating that there's no other liens on the property other than the one that we found that are currently not recorded, no judgments against them that we weren't able to find, pending lawsuits. Basically, you know, the property is vacant. We don't have anybody staying there. Okay, the next form is the payoff agreement. And this also is it has borrowers on there, but it's a seller only form. And it just lets the sellers know that if there was a mortgage, the amount that we collected on the settlement statement to pay off their mortgage came directly from their payoff lender. We did have it in writing. Also, if for some reason the payoff lender did not calculate the payoff correctly, then of course the seller is responsible for that difference to make the loan paid in full. And just so that you know, we do try, when we order payoffs, we always try to order a payoff 5 days past the closing date. We just like to have that few extra days of interest, just to where we're not, if funding gets held up for any reason, or say for instance we don't make the cutoff time that the payoff lender has to require to have their loan paid in full that day, then we have a few extra days in there. But we do try to wire out all the payoffs at all possible. Okay, the next form is a marital status affidavit, and this is also a seller document. And basically all we're wanting to know, and of course we get this ahead of time, because we'll ask your sellers what's their marital status, and basically this is for the time that they acquired the property through the day of closing. So if they acquired the property and they were married and they've since then been divorced and they've remarried, of course we have to have a copy of the divorce decree just to make sure that that spouse was awarded the property, or if there's any equity or anything like that that the ex-spouse was supposed to get. We can just review that prior to closing. Yes. They give you different statements that you can choose from. Okay, and then the next 4 pages, this is just basically their IRS forms. And this is just regarding as to capital gains. Typically they're true or false questions, and it only pertains to this property. And then we'll go over it with the sellers and have them say whether it's true or false. And then of course they sign the back and then put their social security numbers on there. Okay. And then of course if they're perhaps our capital gains, and of course this next form, the substitute form 1099-S, would have them complete this at closing as well.
Complete this as what?
If there are capital gains. Yes, compared to the way that they answer the questions prior, then we'll either have this form completed or it's not applicable. Okay, and then the last form is the buyer and seller address information sheet. We just like to have this on hand. It doesn't go to anybody. It just stays in our file. Just after closing, if for any reason we need to reach the buyer or the sellers, we typically look on this information sheet to get their contact information. And that is it on mock closing. Quiz time now? Is it quiz time now?
No,
Yeah.
Can you hang around for a
Yeah.
minute for me to just?
Yeah, if you wanna go over the checklist and just kind of why we have it.
Yes, let's see. So your Chicago Title Open Order Checklist. This is really good as you get started. You know, when you're sitting down with your sellers or your buyers, just to have this, and you know, once you get going and y'all get so crazy busy, and then you won't have to use this anymore because you've got it down pat. But starting at the top, the open order checklist. Always make sure that you have a fully executed contract, including an execution date. If there's any addendums that are attached that are there, also the seller's disclosure. Always make sure that you have that with your contracts. Always make sure that on the contact page of the contract that you have your buyer contact information and you have your seller contact information. Whether it's, we prefer to have at least one phone number and then of course one email address. Now, again, we're not going to contact your client without contacting you first, just to see if, one, we do have authorization to contact them in regards to why we're calling them, and then but at least we've got it there on the contract. If your seller is providing an existing survey, of course, always make sure that they have a T47. Make sure the survey is legible with all that good stuff on there. If you're representing the seller, make sure if they have a mortgage. Okay, make sure you get their payoff information. Payoff information would include seller's social security number, at least the last 4 digits, if at all possible. Their loan number or account number. Who do they make their monthly payments to? What's the bank name? And then also either a payoff telephone number or a customer service telephone number to that banking institution or mortgage institution. Marital status. What is the marital status of the seller from the time that they bought the property up until closing? Are they a U.S. citizen or a resident alien? We'll have to know that as well. Forwarding address. If the sellers know what their forwarding address is, go ahead and give that to us. Like I said, we always like to put it on the settlement statement under the seller's address bracket, just so that we have it there so it's not the property address being listed. What is the total commission? Is it a total of 6%, or is one agent maybe giving a little bit less than the other? You know, what's the total commission going to be? Will the sellers be attending closing, or is it maybe they're out of state and we have to do a mail out to them using BankServe, or maybe there's a power of attorney involved? Even though some people say, oh, well, you know, it's a seller, you know, the lender doesn't need to see that power of attorney. But really they do, because there are documents in the lender package that the attorneys do prepare. And so we just always like to send that power of attorney to them to review also, and write the power of attorney verbiage on those documents. And then who actually owns the property, whether it's maybe your seller was single at the time and now they've since married. Of course, we'd need to know that spouse's name because both parties would need to be at closing and sign. If you're representing the buyer, who's their lender? Have they chosen, you know, a lender that they're going to go through? If so, if we can get their the bank or mortgage company's name, their loan officer and telephone number or email address. And then at this time, it's a good time to go over some home warranties with your buyer, or give them some brochures, let them look over and see which one they feel more comfortable with. Just to where as we get closer to closing, then we'll know who we need to order that contract with. But it's kind of like a checklist, depending on what side that you're representing, just to kind of help you. You can look at it and go, oh, I forgot I'm representing the buyer, or who's their lender? Who are they going to use? And then, of course, it has a little bitty map of where we're located. And then on the right, it has Meet the Team. And, of course, Lacey is our branch manager. She's also an escrow officer. Gives her assistant, Taryn. Debbie Powers, senior escrow officer. And then, of course, Burl Jones is her assistant. Tiffany Pike. And then myself, Tammy Smart. And then Crystal Morales. So any questions? Not yet? Still trying to digest?
A little overwhelmed.
Where do they make people like you? I would drive me crazy to do that